Good afternoon. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It is Monday, March 16th, 2026. It's almost 2:30. And I know everybody's been waiting a long time for all of this information, and I just want to set expectations appropriately. We are not deciding anything today. We are just getting our first look at what everybody's priorities are and how it's, and we're going to have a conversation about it. This is not being posted. Our priorities are done, I believe, on this sheet by, they're anonymous, so we just see what people have put together. Are there more priorities?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I took them all. I'm so excited, I didn't pass it on.
So I'm going to invoke, you may hear me say this more than once this week, something that a former colleague on this committee said a few years ago, which is nothing is decided until everything is decided. So we may say tomorrow, oh, let's do this, and something else may happen and change, and Friday at 6 o'clock, we're going to do something else. So nothing is decided until everything is decided, and everything will be decided Friday sometime. We hope it's Friday. So everybody get that? That was good. You may not like it, but that's the way this is going to go. So we are going to take a look at what James has put together. Thank you all for putting in your priorities. Just to remind people, what I asked you to do was to say, if you had $0 to $5 million to spend, how would you spend that first $5 million? How would you spend 5 to 10 million or 6 to 10, and second 5 million? And how would you spend a third 5 million if we had that? So that was the assignment. So that was 15 million total. Didn't know if we had 15 million when I gave you that assignment last week. And Emily's going to come talk to us next about what sources of funds are. So we'll see if that's what we have, or if we have less, or if we have more. We'll find out from Emily after that. But I'm not expecting it to be, if there is more, we aren't going to suddenly find $50 million that we didn't have last week, unless some miracle has happened last week. So, James, do you want to talk to us about it? This is not being posted. This is a draft copy that we're talking about here. And if you just want to explain to us what we are looking at.
Sure. So in front of you are the anonymized submissions of the committee members with the results of the prioritization exercise that you all submitted. Each kind of group of 3 tables represents one individual submission. So that first lateral grouping of tier 1, 2, and 3 represents one committee member submission. The next group of 3, tier 1, 2, and 3 represents the next individual submission, and so on. So we have 3 individual committee members submissions on page 1, 3 on page 2, and so on. Subtotals for each tier are given within each tiered ranking from committee members. Some of you have sent me updated adjustments to your tiers as of this morning that this does not quite yet reflect. I've been running around chasing this information. So if you submitted anything to me this morning, adjusting your prioritization exercises, you likely will not see that reflected here. Items in bolded reflect potential global commitment items, just flagging those because those will kind of be subject to further discussion as we nail down specific final amounts for those.
Right, and we told Nolan, and Nolan asked us, don't make him do all the potential global commitments until we know where there's a strong interest, because it takes them a while and it takes AHS a while, and we don't want to make work for people just to say, oh, that's nice, and not do anything.
And the committee has received information from committees of jurisdiction, suggesting general fund global commitment splits for many of these items. What you see reflected in front of you are kind of as the numbers came to me in the submissions from committee members. So some of those global commitment items may be gross, others may be general fund, subject for further discussion among the committee.
Right. So some of the numbers, and I think sometimes some of us put down different amounts.
Yes, and there's dispersion about specific amounts submitted by committee members. Working on some summary documents to kind of like show what was a high priority and what had differing suggestions for funding amounts for the committee. There are also some potential appropriation recipients that were of interest to multiple committee members, but perhaps for different uses as well as different amounts. A good example of that would be Vermont legal aid. So their FY27 request consisted of a number of different appropriations for different purposes, right? Office of the Healthcare Advocate, restoring MAP contract funding, immigrant attorney support, things of that nature. So those working on kind of how to break that up for all of you, but I have in front of me, which I can share on the screen, my preliminary, like kind of highest vote getters across the tiers.
Okay.
Working on additional summary materials for you all to show how that breaks out within the tiers of funding. But wanted to flag that. So you'll see some appropriation items receive many votes, but maybe those votes are split between different suggested uses or different amounts.
Great.
Yeah, I will pull up. So while you have it in front of you, I'll go ahead and pull up this list behind me.
This is not weighted, this is just on a straight number of votes.
Yes, these are just the anonymized submissions from committee members.
I mean, the numbers that you're going to put up now.
Yes, these are just the
Unweighted.
number of votes, unweighted, not weighted by tier, just the number of.
Whether it's tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, all equals 1 point or 1 vote.
Oh.
We didn't weight it. James and I talked about weighting them. So tier 1 is 3, tier 2 is 2, and tier 3 is 1. At this point, we aren't doing that. If we need to, we can do that, but we're not doing it.
Well, and that's hard
Gets-
too, because saying that any of these
Right.
are priorities when they are all priorities.
Right.
Is.
Right, so that's part of it.
Because I really didn't weight mine.
Yeah.
Get it all in there.
Okay, yeah.
Not-
Some people did more than others, and so we didn't go that route. We contemplated and didn't.
And, there were some adjustments to things within tiers and just still working through the information received from the committee and breaking that up into those tiers. So I will have that information for you all, but for now, these are the votes across the tiers. These are just raw vote totals.
Make that bigger.
Yes, I will zoom in.
Please. That's good.
As I was, and this will be updated as I work through the tiers, but as I worked through the results of tier 1, basically what I did for this table was looked at the tier 1 items, what appeared in folks' tier 1 submissions, right? What were the total number of votes that those items received across all submissions, right? So these, what you're looking at behind me is items that appeared in tier 1 rankings, and then the total number of votes they received across.
Regardless of which.
Regardless of whether they
You started with
appeared as
tier
tier 2 or tier 3, right?
Right, and so that legal aid could be, there were 7 items for legal aid. And so that's not broken out, that's just
Yes,
anybody.
these are the
who said
number of, 10 people said, hey, I think we should do
something.
this for legal aid, or there were 10 individual votes for legal aid items, but they, they vary uses.
Okay, so we can get details on that later, okay.
The crop cash program, the Organic Farming Association of Vermont, free and referral clinics, and these, some of these were subject to different suggested funding numbers. So for example, with NOFA, there was consensus around a $500,000, meet the request that was submitted. Free and referral clinics, that will be a general fund potential global commitment split. And so some folks had different submissions for an amount there. So these are just kind of the items that appeared in folks' submissions without final numbers attached quite yet. Meals on Wheels.
It looks like on Meals on Wheels, some people put in, there was $1 million request, some people said, let's do $500,000, but
Right.
8 people said, let's do something.
Yep. And I think the majority of those submissions suggested doing the $1 million appropriation, but there were a handful that were smaller amounts. 6 Advanced Vermont appeared in 6 different submissions. The Nurturing Parent Program, this also appeared in advocate requests as a request from Prevent Child Abuse or the Prevent Child Abuse Program. So this is a sum total of.
And Human Services combined, said that they were the same thing or whatever.
Yep.
I remembered it as Prevent Child Abuse, other people put Nurturing Parent, but in their letter, it was clear that that was the same program.
Yep. The requested $500,000 appropriation to Bridges to Health was appeared in six committee submissions, appeared in a number of tier 1 submissions. Funding contained in H778 for dam safety. The Secretary of State's office had requested additional funding for the Vermont Access Network, additional base funding in FY27 in the amount of $450,000. The majority of votes suggested funding at that requested level. There were a number that requested smaller amounts, for example, 150. I believe there was a vote for a $200,000 base increase to DAN. But that item appeared in 6 different committee member submissions. Secretary of State election support, that was also a $450,000 request. In the tradition of doing additional appropriations to the Secretary of State during even years. We're in an off year fiscal year, but to support even year upcoming elections. There were 2 different Vermont 211 requests. There was the request to restore base funding that was proposed for removal in the governor's recommended budget. The restoration of base funding received 5 committee votes. I don't know that I have the $95,000 request for tech upgrades.
Okay.
I don't know if that appears in the final highest vote getters. Next, Vermont Labor Relations mediator, right? So there had been a request for 2 positions at the Labor Relations Board, a mediator and an attorney. There was committee discussion of funding one of those positions at varying amounts, $125,000 or $150,000. Across those different amounts, there were 5 votes in favor of.
One was they asked for 2 positions. One was a mediator and one was a general counsel, I believe. And so I think our focus had been on the mediator. Yeah.
Next was the treasurer's office request contained in H577. This is a $50,000 request to do marketing and outreach for the proposed Array RX program. These votes were, to my recollection, all at the proposed $50,000 funding level. Next, there were a number of requests received both through the public hearings and from standing committee recommendations to do a one-time general fund transfer in the amount of $450,000 to the Domestic Violence and Sexual Violence Special Fund. And that request received 5, that appeared in 5 committee member submissions. End Homelessness Vermont had made a funding request. The original amount requested by End Homelessness Vermont is escaping me, but they had requested funding.
5 and 11.
Thank you.
Their original request was 611,
Right.
Human Services said 511.
Right. Okay, so various amounts for that.
Various amounts for the End Homelessness Vermont submission or request. And several committee members also noted that there is potential FY25 carry forward from an appropriation to the Agency of Human Services that could be used to offset the total amount of this request in the amount of $168,000.
So we're looking into that.
Yeah. The Human Rights Commission had proposed various appropriations to the committee. There were several requests for positions, requests for, I believe, restoration of vacancy savings that were assumed in the governor's recommended budget. Various committee members were in favor of making an additional appropriation to the Human Rights Commission. But for varying uses. In addition to the Vermont Access Network request, the Secretary of State office had requested base funding to make funding available to community radio stations, which I believe are housed under Vermont
That
Access.
was the 90,000, and I'm wondering if that was part of the 350 or was that separate from the 350?
Part of the 540.
Oh, it's part of the 540. It was
Yeah.
540.
So 450 plus 90.
Great.
We did separate it out.
Yep. And so some folks on the committee had said, I'm in favor of community radio and the Vermont Access Network appropriation. Some were just in favor of one or the other. So this includes anybody who bundles their van appropriation vote with the community radio. So 5 votes for Vermont Access Network, 4 separate votes for community radio. You all have in front of you for consideration H772, which would contain funding for the Vermont State Housing Authority's Tenant Rental Arrears Assistance Program. Funding for that program received 4 votes across the committee, I believe all in the amount for the requested $1 million appropriation.
Right.
Or the proposed 1 million appropriation in H772. There were 4 committee member recommendations for additional funding for skilled home health nurses in the form, I believe, of a rate increase. But there was some dispersion among the committee members, whether that would be an approximately $330,000 gross appropriation, $330,000 just general fund, and followed up with some of the committee members. So the TBD on the final amount there, but requested or recommended funding for skilled home health nurses range from, there were 2 recommendations for 167 about and 2 separate ones for 330 general fund. 4 votes in favor of additional funding for the youth council in the form of a one-time or additional new one-time appropriation to the youth council. I believe from submitted testimony, this would be a preemptive backfilling or replacement of federal funds, which folks who organize the youth council fear may be, they're not certain they'll be receiving that funding for their next funding cycle.
That's the Department of Health, which is interesting. That's where the money has been. It's through the Department of Health.
I think it might be a federal grant that flows through the Department of Health.
And that was, we would appropriate to.
Additional 4 votes in favor of appropriation for the Flood Safety Act requests. So these were, the request that was made was 2 FTEs to implement the Flood Safety Act in the amount of $300,000.
There were 3 positions requested.
And thank you. 3 positions requested. Recommended positions range from 2 to 3 in varying amounts, 300 to 450,000 committee members.
Yeah. Okay.
4 committee members were in favor of additional funding for SASH. That would be a $2.5 million general fund appropriation as it was requested. And in the form of general fund, I believe the estimate is. Yeah, I think that's right. That would be an approximate 2.1 million general fund appropriation. And then we're getting into items that received 3 votes or fewer. So serve, learn, earn, additional funding for the elder care program. There were 2 kind of submissions that I need to follow up with committee members about regarding the elder care program. 2 were pertaining to rates for providers of elder care at the AAAs and the DAs. And then I believe there was a separate recommendation to restore funding for an elder care contract in one of the AHS departments. So some follow-up needed there with the committee members. 3 votes in favor of home share expansion, additional positions at the Ethics Commission in varying amounts. There were 3 votes in favor of the treasurer's requested $75,000 for the amortization task force that's contained or carried in H567. The Land Access Opportunity Board had requested about $105,000 in additional base for FY27. There were 2 committee member votes in favor of that additional base appropriation. You all heard from several committees of jurisdiction as well as advocates during the public hearings in favor of additional funding of about $300,000 for the Natural Resource Conservation Service beyond the governor's recommended funding. This would be used to help make additional leverage for federal funding. There were 2 votes in favor of that requested appropriation. There is funding contained in H740 to go to the Agency of Natural Resources to develop and implement a greenhouse gas inventory. This would be a base appropriation. The bill as it's currently drafted contains a $500,000 appropriation. There were 2 votes overall in favor of this.
It's actually 400. There was a mistake.
Oh,
That
there was.
should only be 400.
Okay.
So even if the person voted for 500, it's actually 400.
Great.
So we know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would, Scott Moore came back over afterwards and said that something that had been, he thought was separate was actually part of, and so anyway, he explained it all. It's 400 is the number, not 500.
And then for our final 3 items that I have to highlight for all of you today, Healthy Homes Initiative. There were 2 committee votes in favor of additional funding for that program. The community outreach program, I believe that the Howard Center had been proposed for a reduction in funding or an elimination of funds in FY27 in the amount of 160,000. There were 2 committee votes in favor of undoing that recommended funding reduction. And then additionally, there were 2 requests received through the public hearings as well as from committee letters in favor of additional base funding for the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative. I believe it was a $500,000 request for additional base and a larger one-time request. The additional base request for 500,000 received 2 committee member votes. And now we're getting into kind of the bundle of the pack that received 2 or 1 votes.
So I think on the community outreach program that we can identify at least 3 of us who put that in. So just FYI, we can check later. Maybe it was said differently by people, and that's why it. Dave?
Could you go back to the top of the page, please?
Yes.
I'm just trying to focus on you, but is that it?
That's the top.
Yeah, could you go down to when you start with the 6s?
Up a little.
Did I see home health in there?
I want to say that I found myself confused about some of the asks, so it might be helpful for Dave at some point to clarify for us the differences between some of the asks. They relate to skilled nursing.
I thought I saw it.
Yeah, and I think there were a bunch of other twos, because I think that more than one of us put in increases for the DAs and SSAs.
Yes. So what I went through with you all, that is the preview of the highest vote getters, right? So anything with 2 votes and above should be captured there. But that lower pack of 2 votes, 1 votes, I'm still working through the committee submissions. And that's not by any means an exhaustive list of what received.
Okay, so this is pretty preliminary right now, and I think we'll need to go back and do a little checking. I think there are things we don't always call them the same thing.
I wanted to clarify that I looked at these as one-time monies as opposed to base. So example, the increase to the DAs, SSA to 3.4, or additional help in the judiciary department, or additional contracts in the state's attorneys, or in the public defenders. I considered those base items, not one-time items.
Yeah.
So I put them on a separate little list, not as part of these.
Okay.
Because I thought we were supposed to be talking about one times.
And it could be both. And I wasn't clear about that yet. But you have a list of the base?
I had suggested for basic.
Okay,
Yes.
does James have that?
Yes, I can adjust your.
Okay, so I think some of these probably are a mix of one-time and base.
Well,
And so then we need to see how much
on
base
this-
we have.
On this list, there are several items that are really base items, like the Vermont 211 and the van. I presume people want that as a base, or it was.
That's the
for
proposal.
Base, the Advanced Vermont, several of those, I think,
Yeah.
were suggested as base
Yeah.
adjustments.
Right, and some of them we may choose, some of them would be hard not to have a base, and some we could choose to
could
have one
maybe-
time.
That's
With many, we can just do one time.
right.
Yeah,
So
so we have a lot to figure out. Did you have a hand up? Did you want to say something?
I did.
Okay,
I'm sorry. I of course I had text James a couple times to say, no, okay, change this, and put this here, you know.
I changed my mind.
And I know that I've really wrestled,
Yeah.
with, I mean, this was hard. It was a good assignment. It's a hard assignment. And I could just as easily go back and recalibrate. I'm wondering what the
Next step.
next step might be, yeah, for us.
I don't have an exact answer for you at this moment. I think we need to
Yeah.
all digest what we're
Yeah.
seeing, and I'm seeing this all for the first time myself as well. So we can talk about how we want to go from here. Some of this is going to be hearing from Emily about what the revenue sources are, so we know what we're actually dealing with. And Emily, will you? Are you going to be able to tell us base and one-time amounts and revenue sources? So that may help us think about things. I'm perfectly fine with using base for one time, but obviously not the reverse.
Right,
No one time for base. But if we use base for one time, from my perspective, that's okay. We don't have to fill up the base with base, because all that's going to do is make it harder next year.
Right, but I think an awful lot of things were requested base.
Oh, everybody knows that word now. So
Right, I know.
everybody wants base.
Yeah.
That's the magic
Right.
word. You all know that
They
word.
hire some people, then.
Yeah.
Usually it's a base item.
Exactly. Wayne?
What, is this a spreadsheet?
Yes.
Let's do a spreadsheet. Where can I find it?
This is in your emails.
Okay. Thanks.
And you can also look at what you've done and make. I'm sure you can all figure, I don't know whose is which in here. I know mine, but that's it. But if you have changes now that you're seeing all this, we can also deal with that. John?
James, do you need any clarification from us? Because we may have like labeled things a little bit differently that may have.
I do. Yeah, a couple notes to follow up with committee members this afternoon and make adjustments accordingly, and then prepare, a higher level synthesis that shows voting across the tiers, prioritization.
Because you might have taken something verbatim off the initial sheets that we
Right.
had here for sure. But in the cause of trying to get one more thing in here to get to $5 million, you
Yeah.
put something in that was labeled differently, or maybe, I know one thing I did, you asked me about, so I'll get clarification.
Yeah.
Soon.
And maybe you put the same thing in twice under two different names, like nurturing parent. I think I originally had nurturing parent and prevent child abuse both in mine. And then I finally figured out it was the same thing, so you only need to do it once. So there may be some of that as well.
Then you get some of the notes. John follows instructions. I don't follow instructions.
Well, we know that.
Thank you for noting that.
Let the record show.
I'm thinking of dumping this into AI.
Yeah, ask AI what AI thought. No.
If you got any questions you want me to ask, when you put it in there, you can ask any kind of questions.
We can have a different conversation about that.
I'm just saying this process is really difficult and in some ways a little bit demeaning. Just because we listened for 2 months to the needs,
Mhm.
whether it was the administration wants and needs or whether it was organization wants and needs. And I think we all understand that there's an element of the word game involved, but it's not. It's part of the process of when I was sitting down with these, I'm like, well, it's not a question of how do you choose? Like, we were given a set amount of money to work with. And so a whole category, at least when I was choosing, didn't even get heard anymore.
Mhm.
It didn't matter what the committee letter said, didn't matter what these votes are. It didn't matter what the testimony was. It became a game of, well, for instance, I didn't write down the Defender General or the state's attorney. Spent a lot of time with the state's attorney.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I just felt like it was not, I can't say it's a bad process because I don't have any other expectation of what we do. But I did feel like we asked folks to come in here and listen and share our thoughts. And in the back of our head, we're saying, oh, there's not enough money. There's not enough money. We don't know what we're going to do. And I just think it's really hard. We put people out on the line to, either in a cheap way, say, pitch their needs, express their needs. And then we end up with this number.
It's very hard.
It's, and I just want to impress that
Yes.
for me personally, it's worse than hard. I think it's really at times. And it's, yes, it's back to austerity budgeting.
Yeah.
Where we have a number and we have to budget to that rather than budgeting to the need. And, without a system that will allow us to increase our revenues in order to take care of Vermonters. And, I don't know, well, you listen to what Emily has to say, but I just want to express that because it's been bothering me all weekend.
Yeah.
It's bothered me all week. It's bothered me probably for the last 2 months of knowing that this was going to happen like
Yeah.
this, and we're not even done. And so, this week is going to be brutal.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to share that because I think everybody who's asked for our help and the people who won't get it, what are they going to do for the next year?
I don't know. Yeah.
So just wanted to share
It's
that.
very hard. I appreciate you sharing that. And there's no question about how hard this is. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, there are also things that, I didn't know enough about. And so they didn't rise to the occasion. And my expectation is I'm going to talk to people. I tried this weekend and talked to as many people as I could to find out more about stuff that, I was either absent for testimony for, and I, just because something might be get two mentions doesn't mean that with discussion, more of us will say, actually, that's really important. I mean, I just think that what we were looking at as a preliminary way of how it sugared out, given what we knew, each of us individually, and we'll know more.
And what the committee letter said. And the testimony we've gotten. I mean, this is just not easy. There's no question about it. It is not easy. It's really hard. It hurts. It hurts not to be able to do everything that. Imagine many of us feel that.
Madam Chair, you all are going to hear from Emily about available revenue in 27. And we're going to follow up with some members of the committee with some clarifications on their submissions. And tomorrow you all will receive the overview document of submissions across the tiers to help guide your next discussion. You'll dig in more about priorities and individual members' priorities.
Okay. So James will be around and he'll reach out. Don't leave without talking to James today. We have more to come, but anyway, before you leave today, make sure that he and you are clarified on what your stuff is. That would be really helpful, I think. Because he's done a lot of work for this and a lot of work over the weekend. And thank you, James, for trying to wrestle on this.
Sure.
You have 11 people who do things their own way. It's it's always a challenge. So thank you very much.
So you appreciate.
Emily, do you want to just come up?
Sure.
Oh.
To Autumn.
There it is.
You jump in?
Whenever you're ready.
Great. So I just sent the PowerPoint to Autumn. I'm actually gonna have her print it for you after the fact if you want it.
Okay.
So that you can't look ahead.
Thanks.
What's that?
He knows
Knows us.
Gonna get in the Zoom.
You said next next Monday we vote on this, right? We do the straw.
We will do
poll on
straw
Friday.
poll Friday night and the final vote on Monday.
Disney.
And then we're on the floor Thursday and Friday of next week. And we are going to likely have that's not my computer. We are likely to do a brief caucus of the whole next Wednesday morning before judicial retention. And then we're going to do our office hours thing that we did like we did last year in the well of the house. I haven't actually talked to Emily and James about this yet, and Chris and everybody else, but probably at lunchtime on Wednesday. Last year, we sat down and we had the highlight sheets and all that, and people came up and asked us questions, and mostly we said, Emily can answer that, and James can answer that, and so they were looking at stuff there. So that's sort of the plan, and then so Wednesday is when all that happens, and then Thursday, Friday, we're on the floor, second reading, third reading. We will not meet after the floor on Friday, the 27th. We'll be done. We're done with the budget, and then everybody can go and enjoy their weekend.
So when will we have to have a floor report? When will we be on the floor with it?
Thursday.
Thursday, so we have to have that.
Yep. Yep. And we'll have highlight sheets from during fiscal.
That's next week.
Next week. That's all next week, not this week. Oh, goodness, no. All right. You have something you want to put up?
Yeah, sure. So I have a presentation. Sure. Yeah, about some of the changes in sources of funds to the general fund since the governor's budget was recommended, and since your colleagues in Ways and Means have they passed a bill on Friday night that changes some of the sources available to the general fund. So we'll walk through some of those things and the impact on the budget generally. Hopefully it makes sense when we're all done. So there are three, sort of two and then two subparts to the first one that we are going to talk about this afternoon. So in the bill that was passed by Ways and Means that I referenced that is on it will be here tomorrow afternoon. So when we get into some of the details about it, I'm not going to get into the specific details about the revenue pieces that have changed. Let's talk about the high level numbers. Pat Titterton from JFO and I will be here tomorrow to speak a little bit more in detail. 99% Pat will be here. Budgetary questions, but to talk about the changes that were in that bill. So it's the act relating to miscellaneous administrative and policy changes to the tax laws. The short name, the miscellaneous tax bill. So one of the things that changes is, and this is alluding to what we'll go through, but and the governors recommend there's a $10 million transfer to the education fund to make up for the shifting of the purchase and use tax. Based on what was passed by Ways and Means, that $10 million would no longer be needed if that bill were to move forward. And then there are some additional changes, and additional funding that's generated that's available from the income tax, primarily the corporate income tax, but a very little bit, and the business and personal income tax piece. And then finally, in terms of the looking around in couch cushions, we identified that there is some interest in the technology modernization fund that has accumulated, which could be of use if you wanted to use it. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get there. But so first we'll start with the miscellaneous tax bill and what changes were there. And first we'll talk about specifically the changes in the allocations of the meals and rooms and the purchase and use tax. So as I just spoke to, recall in the governor's budget, he included $114.9 million transfer from the general fund to the education fund. $74.9 million of that is from the fiscal year 2026 bottom line. So that was in the Budget Adjustment Act that you all just passed.
2025, right?
No, 2026 bottom line. 25 is done and closed and over. There was
We
money in
carried it
25.
forward into 26.
Carried money into 26.
Okay.
Then we built money, we did 26.
And we're keeping it.
And there's another,
Yeah.
you put everything in the pot and then shake everything out. There's about 74.9 million on the bottom line at the end, projected to be on the bottom line at the end of FY 26. In addition to that, the governor proposed unreserving one of the $30 million that was set aside from Act 27. There was the first 30 million was specifically for federal fund reductions. The second 30 million, the legislature left it a little more open-ended. Federal fund reductions, property tax relief, and a few other things that were identified. So the governor is proposing to unreserve one of those $30 million set-asides last year. And then an additional $10 million to replace the reduction in the purchase and use tax redirected from the education fund to the transportation fund. What the governor had proposed was reduce the amount of purchase and use tax going to the education fund, increase the amount going to the transportation fund. What that in effect did was create a gap in the education fund in terms of revenue. And then the governor proposed take 10 million out of the general fund and put it in the education fund to fill that gap.
3 steps to get the money.
Yes. So in the issue with using this transfer construct to replace using, one-time transfer from the general fund to replace the purchase and use tax in the education fund is that's really one-time in nature. So you transfer $10 million this year, but the change to the purchase and use tax allocations was an ongoing change. So what happens next year, right? They sort of create a structural gap in the education fund if you only do it with a one-time transfer. So you need to come up with another source. That I just restated what I just said. So what Ways and Means is proposing is rather than do a one-time transfer, they're proposing actually change the allocations of the taxes that go into each of those individual funds. So we'll start with the purchase and use tax. So current law for purchase and use says 2/3 go to the transportation fund and 1/3 goes to the education fund. So that would have put $51.9 million of purchase and use tax into the education fund based on the 2026 January revenue forecast. That's that number in red. This is the language from the governor's recommended. This is the language packet that the governor gave you, his recommendation. The governor recommended rather than have this 1/3 of purchase and use going to the education fund, the governor recommended actually fixing the amount of purchase and use tax that goes to the education fund in FY 27, and then every year going forward and declining that by $10 million a year. So the reduction, his budget was based on recommending $41.9 million going to the education fund from the purchase and use tax versus the forecast of 51.9. A little slow. So.
Good question. Go ahead, Josh.
Can you just tell me about the status of doing something like that in statute where we are not supposed to like handcuff future legislatures and so is this just something that is a suggestion for this particular year and next year someone can make a change to that? Or is it locked in like those tax, the tax relief on the federal level that seems to always be locked in?
So I think for the purposes of how to allocate revenue, that's not so much binding a future legislature in the same way that if this wasn't like an appropriation, right? So rather than saying every year going forward, 1/3 of this amount of money will go to the transportation fund or the education fund, this is saying that an amount will go to the education fund. So it's not. I mean, it's saying like this is the specific amount that gets allocated versus the specific percentage that gets allocated.
But where does notwithstand fit in? I mean, again, the property transfer tax, we took from that for years and years and years because we notwithstood that to take the cash out. So where does that fit in? I mean, I know it's a different use of the cash. So how does that work here? I mean, just because it says 41.9 or 31.9, what does that actually mean when we get to those dates? Is that set in stone?
Yes, that's what the governor was proposing in this language. Was
No,
that?
I'm just curious because I'm always wiggy about when we put something in statute that seems so definite and yet it either doesn't get fulfilled or it changes, or there's other workarounds to it.
Yeah, and I think, right, you could have all, like, if you had this type of language can be adopted and then always amended by future legislators, right? And that's the sort of you can always not withstand something, you could always change the statute.
But this was his construct in this moment in time.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is what the governor recommended for the allocation of purchase and use tax to the education fund. So get rid of 1/3 and make it a fixed dollar amount that decreased every year for 10 years, or for 5 years, excuse me.
No discussion on why it wasn't a percentage instead of a fixed amount. Could have done the same thing with a percentage, right?
This is just the way the governor proposed to do it. So,
Which is a good segue into what Ways and Means did. So what Ways and Means has proposed is to actually change the percentage of what's going to the education fund versus what's going to the transportation fund. So current law is 1/3 and 2/3. Ways and Means is proposing increasing the allocation of the purchase and use to the transportation fund to 73% and decreasing the amount going to the education fund to 27%.
of the purchase and use.
Of the purchase and use tax. The net impact on the FY 27 receipts to the education fund and the transportation fund is a $9.9 million decrease. The net zero impact, but that's the shift. So this would move, rather than transfer $10 million, rather than change the allocation of the purchase and use tax going to the education fund and then transfer general fund into the education fund, this would just say, of the money that's coming in, this much goes over there and this much goes over here, and then.
And it's just the percentage, which is what we've been doing with these things, education fund anyways, percentages. That's part A.
This is the beginning of this. Right, that's part A. So, but now you have $9.9 million hole in the education fund, if you will. So how do you make the education fund? I just said whole. Now we need to make the education fund whole. Okay. I've been talking with my 6-year-old about the word C and C a lot and the difference, and now like I'm a hominin.
Whole and whole.
Okay. Anyway, all right, so then we go to the meals and rooms tax. So the meals and rooms tax is split between the education fund, the general fund, and the clean water fund. So what the Ways and Means is proposing is changing these allocations to make the education fund whole. So this is current law, 25% to the education fund, 69% to the general fund, and 6% to the clean water fund. It used to be 1/4, 3/4, but then the clean water fund construct came in. And I should know,
As a result of the issue with Lake Champlain, I remember when we did that to help fund. We were trying to figure out how to fund the cleanup, Lake Champlain cleanup, which we were required by law to do, and that's when we put that in. I had forgotten all about that. Thank you.
transfer tax. So the Ways and Means in the bill that they passed on Friday is proposing to change the allocation of the meals and rooms tax to make up for the changes to the purchase and use tax allocation. So increasing the education fund allocation from meals and rooms to 29%, decreasing the general fund share to 65%, and then nothing happens to the clean water fund. It's just in there so it all adds to 100. But what that does is puts $10.8 million into the education fund and reduces the general fund revenue by $10.8 million.
The governor we had assumed we were going to be reduced by 10 million. Whatever happened, however we did it, now we got another $800,000 cut under this proposal.
Right.
From general fund.
But the positive in this is that it's now structural, not
Yes.
one time.
That's right. That's right, which is an appropriate way to go. Even if we were getting,
Similar outcome so far.
yes.
Right, so the net of the meals and rooms and the purchase and use changes. So the idea, right, is to leave the education fund basically whole, right? So $9.9 million coming out of going to the transportation fund from the education fund, and then $10.8 million coming out of the general fund and going to the education fund. Leaves the education fund at a positive $900,000. Transportation fund gets $9.9 million, and that leaves the education fund or the general fund with $10.8 million less. So, and just recall, as we were just saying, so the GovRec proposes transferring $10 million from the general fund to the education fund to make up for his change in purchase and use tax. Ways and Means proposes to change the allocation of the rooms and meals tax to make up for its change in purchase and use tax. You got to do one or the other to keep the funds whole, but you don't have to do both, right? So effectively, by making the change in the allocations, you don't have to make the transfer to the education fund. So how that will reflect in the general fund operating statement and in the bill itself, the revenue changes will happen. So those will be seen in the sort of sources to the general fund in terms of revenue. And then the transfer to the education fund, if you adopt the Ways and Means construct where you change the actual allocations, then you will reduce the amount that's being transferred from the general fund to the education fund by the $10 million that was proposed by the governor.
Right. We don't have to do the $10 million transfer because it's put into this.
And again, structurally,
Right,
it's just there and it will happen.
right,
Whereas if we continue it as a one-time
right.
thing for 5 years, we just have to remember that every year for 5 years.
And argue about it or not argue about it or whatever, just,
But we're still losing 10 million.
Right.
Out of general.
we were gonna lose 10 million regardless.
Right, I know.
Unless we didn't even want to do anything that the
Right.
governor wanted to do.
Right.
But now we're gonna lose 10.8 million.
Right.
So we're losing 800,000 more
Mhm.
out of the
You're just
goodness
paying
of our
extra to do it
pockets.
right.
We're paying
Right.
extra to do it
Just 'cause
right.
you wanted to fight.
Okay,
Right. And in the universe of being, your loss is the ed fund's gain. Right, so it's, yes, the general fund is out $800,000, but the ed fund has a couple $1,000. So it's not like it's going, nobody's losing it. It's not like it's going.
it's just different than what we
It's
thought we
going
were gonna have,
different places.
right, yeah. But I do like the notion of it being structural as opposed to arguing about it every single year. That makes a lot more sense. The set it and forget it kind of thing. Okay,
Okay, so then another way to sort of slice it and look at it from the education fund perspective, right? So the governor recommended the purchase and use tax at 41.9 million, do a one-time general fund transfer, and then the meals and rooms tax was going to be 67.2. The Ways and Means, which was $119.1 million to the education fund through those revenue sources, right? All else being equal, assume there's no other changes going on in the education fund. You compare those same things to what Ways and Means did. Ways and Means purchase and use tax, 42 million to the education fund. And then the increase in the meals and rooms tax allocation, the $78 million, puts you 120. The difference is that 0.9. That makes sense. This is just another way to think. People's brains work differently. So this is just another way to see. We just, so.
And again, this is accepting without perhaps further discussion that we're moving 100 and some odd $1 million
that's right.
from the bottom line to, is that a solid conversation or lack of conversation? We're not going to have a conversation about what to do with that 100 and.
I believe that's going to be addressed in the Ways and Means yield bill. This is the miscellaneous tax bill. It will be addressed in the yield bill.
Right, I'm just, when I'm looking in the landfill, I guess, more than the couch for
Mhm.
money, like if we can't touch the surplus monies for one time conversation, that
That's right. We need to make that assumption that money is off limits.
which is unfortunate. But that's just me.
Okay,
So this, we talked to this, right? But the difference between GovRec and the House proposal coming out of Ways and Means, right? The governor transferred $10 million from the general fund to the education fund. Ways and Means is doing this reallocation of meals rooms tax. The difference between those two things is $800,000. So if the General Assembly moves forward with the construct as passed by Ways and Means, that will in effect, in quotes, cost the general fund $800,000, which will need to be made up somewhere. The good news is there are some other changes to the general fund that may help deal with that. So also in the miscellaneous tax bill is the link up, which you may all recall, or say the link up or the lack thereof a link up this year, or change to the link up this year. annually, typically, General Assembly has to decide how and if to link up to the federal income tax code. So I think it might have been in the budget last year, actually, but every year, to the extent that IRS makes changes, the federal government makes changes to the income tax code, and to the extent our personal income tax code is linked and corporate income tax code are linked to the federal IRS code, General Assembly has to make a proactive decision how and if and what year to link up to. Most years, it's a pretty straightforward process. There aren't a lot of changes. But in some years, that's not the case. The last time that there was not a pretty strict link up was after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, right? And a lot of decisions were made about where in the tax code to link up and how that changes happen. We're seeing this again this year, further conversations that happen in Ways and Means and with the tax department. So the OBBBA or HR1, the federal law that passed over the summer, right, had a lot of changes to the tax code, which complicates the decision if and how to link up, and what to link up to and how all of that works. Again, I mentioned at the beginning, but Pat will be here tomorrow to talk more about that. The forecast that was done assumes current law. So the forecast itself is sort of silent on what happens.
The revenue, consensus revenue forecast that we got in January.
Yeah.
Didn't just assume we were going to keep doing whatever we're doing now. Yeah.
So there had to be some choices made to ensure that we both had the revenue that we are going to need and then make some decisions based on what the federal government did. So without getting into those details. So the bill that was passed by Ways and Means as a result of making decisions about what to link up to and what to decouple from at the federal level, and also looking at some of the changes in tax credits and how to implement some of those things and how some of those could be changed based on the changes happening due to linking and decoupling from the federal tax provisions, resulted in an additional projected general fund revenue in FY 2017 of $14.25 million. It also results in a loss of projected revenue in FY 26 of $3.96 million. They'll have to account for that in FY 26, and then we'll have those additional funds in FY 27. It also appropriated $100,000 to the Joint Fiscal Office for the 10-year tax study that we do every year. I believe that was on 10-year lists. It was in the Ways and Means letter, but that is actively done in that letter. You all will decide whether or not to leave that in that bill or not. But for the purposes of all of the things that were in that bill, that changes in there. So that leaves in FY 26, again, negative $3.96 million, and in FY 27, a positive $14.15 million in the general fund. And I know I said we would talk about base and one time. For this, for the anything that happens in 26 at this point is effectively one time because you're sort of amending two things simultaneously. FY 27 though, we've talked about it internally. This is base change to mostly corporate and business income taxes. So
that's base, not one.
this is base, yep.
Marty?
So the 14 for FY 27 is greater than we had before. The 13 for 28, is that another 13 over the 14, or is that 13 more compared to where we are now?
13 compared to the FY 28 adopted revenue forecast.
Adopted.
What we did in January.
For 28?
For 28, yep. The revenue forecast has 5 years, so it's
Okay, gotcha.
Fine.
yeah.
So for the FY 27 budget's purpose, we should really, like when we look at that 14, 15, we subtract the 3.9. Okay.
Yes.
And the 800.
And the yes. So for purposes of
Still more than the 3 million that I thought we might have.
what's available, there's the additional revenue from the link up for the coupling and linking up as Ways and Means has done. Less the true up necessary due to the meals and rooms allocation change adopted in that bill as well. And then making sure that FY 26 is trued up. And the way that we would do that likely in the budget bill assuming you all approved, is we would reduce, so in FY 20, and this is circling all the way back to the beginning when we talked about the education fund and the amount that's left on the bottom line. We would effectively reduce the amount that's projected to be on the bottom line at the end of FY 26 from the 74.9 to 71 point whatever, 71, right? And then in FY 27, we would just have to increase that would come out of all the general fund, right? And we would increase, that would be part of the transfer. We would still transfer the same amount to the education fund. Just the amount that's sort of coming from the 26 bottom line would be reduced. And it would just be coming from the 27 available funds.
The impact, they'll do the mechanics. The impact is that number. That's what we need to know.
Yes. So at the end of the day, 9.4 million on the bottom line in FY 27. Does that make sense? Clear as mud? Cool. Okay, so then the second piece, in terms of looking for funds, finding what's available is some interest in the Technology Modernization Fund. So the Technology Modernization Fund, it was created in 2022. It's administered by the Agency of Digital Services. It's to provide funds to purchase and implement and upgrade technology platforms, systems, cybersecurity services in state government. In 22 and in 23, when there was a lot of excess general fund kicking around, the General Assembly decided to transfer pretty large sums of money, like 50 million and $40 million, I believe, to that fund to fund some pretty big technology modernization projects. I pulled the balance of the funds just in the last 2 fiscal years. But that fund accrues interest. And per the statute of that fund, the interest that accrues in that fund stays in that fund. I don't know at the time of when the fund was set up, what the specific discussion was about what happens with that interest. It has to be actively appropriated by the General Assembly. But at this time, because the interest that was accrued in that fund there's been no request for it to be appropriated, nor has the General Assembly appropriated. It's sitting in that fund. So in FY 23, it was 2.3 million, 24, almost 4 million, and then accrued about 3.3 for a total of interest of $9.53 million of interest in the Tech Modernization Fund today.
So that fund doesn't have any revenue stream, just it was a one-time thing.
Correct. It's just transfers made by the General Assembly to that fund at this time. Tom?
What's the relationship of the Technology Modernization Fund to anything that we're doing with ADS?
So the Tech Mod Fund pays for specific projects. So the funds that have been appropriated out of the fund, like the Enterprise Resource Planning, the ERP, which is the replacement of the state accounting system and payroll system. The money for that project was transferred to this fund and then is appropriated out of that fund. The unemployment insurance project was in that, and the DMV modernization funds were in this fund. I think part of the intent was that these IT projects, right, they're not done in one fiscal year. They go over multiple fiscal years. So in effect, it was to create a place to set those funds aside for the funds to be appropriated as needed for those projects, right, sort of in big chunks. And then when those projects were done, then the money would be spent out of that fund.
So this is more modernization, can be transformation, but ADS is annual usage. Is that like we heard that 2 years ago or whatever, ADS was $1 million in the black, and now it's $25 million in the red.
Yes, this is
That red is not being pulled from this fund.
It's not this fund. This is a totally separate fund specifically for specific projects. Not the operations of the Agency of Digital Services.
Right, Marty, who was here when the whole thing was set up, and she had this as her
Set that
portfolio.
up. This was in the ARPA days, and we had tons of money, and we were looking at, we needed new DMV, we needed unemployment, we needed the ERP system, we needed a whole bunch of stuff to replace our 30-year-old systems that everybody's complaining about. And we had this money, and we said, okay, we had estimates for some of those really large projects. And we said, let's put it aside in a totally separate fund. So as we develop the actual implementation of these and get quotes and get far further details on how we're going to use it, we have a chunk of money sitting here that we could pull from. And yes, it was supposed to sit in this fund and the interest was going to accrue to that fund. And at the time, the idea was that the interest would stay in that fund because at a later time, we might want to put, $20 million in there or $30 million in there. If we had it, for more things are going to need to be upgraded over time. And then with legislative approval, we would agree, okay, we're going to spend 20 million on the DMV and we're going to take it out of this money. And the interest was supposed to keep going because we were going to use that model for handling the really big things that come along. So that's there, and it has nothing to do with the general operation of ADS.
Right, and this is just the interest part, not the principal.
Right, no, I understand
Right,
that.
I'm just clarifying for everybody else. I know you know that.
So second question then, you mentioned that the money is supposed to stay in the fund, but we're raising the question whether or not we can use it for the general fund this year. Is there an issue with this having been ARPA funds where it's audited, or has this been washed in the way that we've washed a lot of?
This is not ARPA money because it's interest.
Right.
If I have this correct.
Right, and the base was general fund to begin with.
Basic general.
Okay, so that was,
Absolutely.
okay. Your
Good
intention
question.
was during that time.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
Those are. that's a
Because
really
we
good
had
question.
those extra funds available.
Yeah, I mean,
And they
I use
were
the phrase
transformational
wash, I
projects.
use the
Right.
phrase wash not in a negative way, but for instance, we got so much money from COVID. And then we got sales taxes from all the stuff that we were buying, which was then our money.
Yeah.
And so it may not be
Yeah.
the same as that, but I just,
Yeah.
okay,
This is our money.
okay.
Right.
So the way I see the question is, I mean, we know that modernization of, it's going to be ongoing forever. Question is, do we leave it in there knowing that it's always going to be needed? Or do we have a more compelling immediate need for that money to go someplace else? So, see what I mean?
And that's how you're thinking about it.
So we got money that's intended for the purpose of, improving our IT through time, projects, not operational, but projects. We know there's always going to be projects. So it's merely a matter of, do we have a compelling reason to use the money now? Or do we anticipate we won't be able to put the money back in later if we needed it?
Well, the balance stays the same, right?
The balance.
The balance stays the same, so it's gonna generate $3 million a year in interest or so.
Well, I'll go back to they're spending that money, right? They're implementing these projects. So it is the
Principal, if you think of it as principal
Right,
and interest,
yeah.
right? So right now, at the end of 25, there was 64.2 million in principal, not the interest.
Right.
Just the principal available to do the projects, and we put money in and I think identified specific projects
We did.
at the
originally,
time.
Yes.
that was going to be used for, and then the money is throwing off interest that is separate, and only the General Assembly has the authority to appropriate the 9.5 million, the interest. So it's not attached to a project or anything like that at this point. And can I just finish, have Emily just finish one more piece of this? And then I've got John and Wayne to ask more questions, which is about interest going forward. We had a thought about the interest. This is what the interest is now through 2025.
Correct. And I think, and so this would, this is how much interest has been earned to date, depending on if you are, again, interested in redeploying it or not, leaving it behind for future major IT projects, or moving it into the general fund to be used for higher priorities at this point. That's sort of up for discussion. And there is
It's future interest.
future
I have an
interest.
idea of possibly where future interest could go.
Yes, so Rep. Shai and I talked about Rep. Stevens, to your point, to the extent the
CIT fund?
information technology, I can't remember what it's, computer information technology fund or whatever, the CIT fund. Thank you. The fund that ADS operates, I believe Deputy Commissioner Merrill from Finance and Management talked about how it's projected to have about a $25 million deficit at the end of this year. Is it worth deploying any future interest generated by the Technology Modernization Fund to buy down that deficit, right? At some point, there's going to have to be some decision made in terms of how that deficit gets dealt with. And is this a source of revenue, effectively, the interest from this fund as a way to chip away at that deficit over time?
So again, where's the deficit?
In the CIT fund,
And so
that's ADS's operating.
they're changing a lot in ADS, if you recall. And for the first time ever, we're being asked to put $9 million in general fund into ADS to help support their programs because they can't collect everything. Just to complicate things. So that's new, and that will be an ongoing appropriation to ADS from general fund. Ongoing, that 9 million is not a one-time event. That would probably be in the base.
Yeah.
In the base, right? Yeah.
I think, well, that's the intent.
Right.
Yes, but putting up those 3 extra internal service funds may help reduce some
That's
of the
right.
deficit in the CIT fund simply because they're more accurately charging back for their services. And so the deficit in the CIT fund may slowly
Right.
get reduced because of the reorganization.
Okay, so I have Wayne, John, Tiff.
John was first.
John, Wayne, Tiff.
That's okay. Whatever order we want to go in
Whoever
here.
it is.
So that was kind of the thread of question I had here as well here. So we have this, wherever it went to, $9.53 million of interest here accrued over 3 fiscal years. So the question is, you take all of that and use it towards something. Do we take a portion of it to use towards what I think would be best
Mhm.
to perhaps free up what Marty was just talking about there with
Well, it would just stay in the fund unless we decided to appropriate it to the CIT fund. And there hasn't been an urgency on the part of the administration to use all these funds to pay down the deficit in the CIT fund. That has not been.
That's my question, I guess, is something for us to think about, question for us to
Right.
consider. Do we do that, or do we take some portion of it to maybe do
And
something?
remember, it's throwing off
Or-
2 million or whatever, 2.5 to 3 million a year that we could also say future interest should go to pay off the CIT fund. It's an option of a thing we could do.
I didn't know we were discussing that, or that's.
There's lots of
It's-
possibilities,
right.
right? There's no decisions have been made.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
just
my
throwing this
question.
out to the
What
committee to
possibilities
think
do we
about.
really have here with this?
Right.
with that interest?
I would just say that in the past, the administration has not been, administration, finance and management, everybody hasn't been too terribly concerned about deficits in
Right.
internal service funds.
That's right.
I mean, we built them up in lots of different
Right.
places.
And we could.
And there are times where we need to plug the hole, so like in the E911 board or the criminal record check, those special funds where we had to put in $1 million or $2 million in order to make it whole. We've had other internal service funds where they've had pretty large deficits, so we just kind of muddle.
Yeah. And that's an option too.
Right.
Absolutely. Wayne and then Tiff.
Just for general information, is any or all of the money, the principal in that fund earmarked for specific projects, or is it
Yes,
projects as they come along?
no, the particular fund was set up with specific projects in mind.
So
And I can dig out that file, but yes, they presented them.
It's all
to us.
earmarked.
Yes,
The
yes.
principal, not the interest. Right. Okay, Tiff, Mike.
I have one, just reflection, it's just interesting to me. I mean, as long as I've been on this committee, and it's only been 4 years, but ADS has always come in with multi-million-dollar asks. And yet we level fund many projects year after year after year. And that discrepancy is really frustrating to me. I feel that because I don't know what ADS really does and what it costs to, I can't question a lot of those numbers, but we're starving certain resources, systems, and we seem not to have, I perceive that we're kind of at the, I'm so inarticulate today, but we end up, kind of just throwing our hands in the air when it comes to something like ADS. And that's a comment and that I'm really wrestling with, because I don't know how you level fund services year after year after year when the state has put them in statute. That said, one of the things that I know we have to invest more in is the CCWIS, the DCF database that had a big crash this fall. And why is that not a priority? And why wouldn't we've put some money in it, but it's going to need much more to do the kind of work. And we can't draw down, it's not cost effective because we are missing out on federal funds that we could pull down if we had database to do
Tens of
it.
millions of dollars possible. Okay, I've got Mike, Lynn, then we'll go back to.
I'm just wondering if this fund was set up with specific projects in mind, if we have any sense of where we stand with those projects, what remains, how, are we trending so the remaining principal should cover these projects?
I'm looking at Marty.
I'm looking-
Can you check into
Trying to-
that?
Yes, the slide that they showed us mentions this was set up for the Enterprise Resource Planning Fund, a workplace information management system, can't recall that one right now, fire safety modernization system, and Attorney General's case management system, a D&V core system modernization, which is complete.
Done. Yeah.
It's done. The unemployment insurance project, it's got 5 million left, but I think that's expected to be done by the end of springtime. A state network modernization. So there's remaining amount. It looks like of 27 million.
This was a presentation they gave to us.
Yes,
And if we want to find it on our website, is there either a date or a person so we can go find it?
it's in the report
Yes.
from, it's ADS, it's Denise Riley Hughes. It's the
Oh, it's
date of
Denise.
February
Okay.
3rd.
February 3rd. Okay.
Yes.
Different ways we can go find it. Okay, so that's Mike's question. And then I have Lynn and.
Oh, I'm
Mike.
sorry, that's a report that went to Digital Energy, but it's in one of their other reports to us too.
Okay.
So I sort of was asking the same type of question. I mean, it's throwing off whatever it was, 3 million in interest over 3 or 9 million over 3 years, 9.5. As that money gets spent down without any kind of further ARPA money or general fund money, that interest will decline as well.
Right.
Yes, the interest will decline. Yep.
One-time money and then like opiate
Right.
use, it's like, when it's gone, it's gone. And it won't generate any more income. I mean, we're doing this, in fact, with our cash flow money, the treasurer's office. The question is when that money, a lot of that money gets spent by December of 26 from ARPA, then we'll go back to being the more normal cash.
That's going to be pretty slow. They've got 1.5 billion in the
Yeah, they
treasury.
got a
It's
lot
not
of
going to
money
be
there.
700 million
Yes.
next year.
But yeah, and that one's healthier. But the point is that, that's the problem with one-time money, that you're going to use the interest off of it to continue to fund things. And the other thing that I want to say, that's a concern. But the other thing I want to say is that computers were sold to all of us. And I remember this with healthcare back when I was on the POC back in the early 2000s. And everything else, it was all going to save us money. And there is no savings in computers. The thing gets obsolete after 3 years. You have to constantly upgrade it. You have to constantly buy new equipment. It just goes faster. It just does everything. And so ADS is that's a normal situation. And if you don't have it, you will lose matching federal funds for something that you're counting on. Or it will break, you know, like UI's been around since, I don't know, the sixties or the fifties, and it's, the computers need to be maintained, whether you like it or not, because we have all become so dependent on it. Whether it's you're keeping track of not just the money, but the people or all sorts of things. So it's ADS may not be at fault, but it's just part of the cost of doing business. It's an unfortunate thing to say, but that's, I don't see how you can get around it.
I think this fund was set up for these specific projects and no other projects are being funded through this fund. Is that
Correct. And so now if
Right.
we need to think about ADS's change in their format in terms of the bespoke stuff, which under their new system, my presumption is that if some other agency decides they need a new computer system, they're gonna do some calculation and they're gonna work with ADS and they're gonna say, okay, costs $20 million to do whatever. That money, the $20 million, is gonna have to come from the agency.
That's
It's
right.
not gonna be going through ADS like these other items we did in the past. The other items where they were actually part of the ADS budget, but then we put aside this separate account. We said, okay, we know these are 5 things that we're gonna have to have in the next 10 years. We think we know how much they cost, we're gonna set aside the money so that we have it. But for future things that come along under this new funding mechanism that ADS set up, it'll be called the bespoke stuff, and this particular agency will have to come up with the $20 million. Now, I'm sure they're gonna come to us and say, well, how do we do that? We say, well, we'll give you $2 million a year for 10 years, whatever, in order to make that work. Or I'm not sure how we're gonna do that in the future. So, but I agree with you, it's, we all complain about the cost of IT, but everything runs on IT.
Right.
And, the example of, things in Agency of Human Services that are losing money because they don't have the right software in order to present the right data to the federal government according to their rules so that you then qualify for things. Somebody has to measure that and decide, are we really losing money? Is it really important enough to upgrade the equipment so we get more money? But what's the trade-off by doing that? And that decision has to be made. And I don't know, and you don't know what's going to be changing in the future.
Right.
In terms of requirements from
Right.
granting authorities. So what do we have to prepare for in order to have a robust enough system so that you can modify it to meet future requirements in order to ask for federal grants? We don't
So
know.
I think Wayne, another thing, and then Dave, I've got you after Wayne.
Just if you know, principal's all earmarked. So that suggests to me that the interest is not earmarked, which means for that to be spent, we'd have to set a purpose for it.
Yep.
Even if it stays in that fund, we have to set a purpose for it. And I share Tiff's concern about everything that had that concern for many, many years about, how do we decide on these things? If I was king, then I could decide it wrong, right? If we were king, the process would be a lot easier, but we don't. But then the 9 million, when we got a pot of money sitting like that, if there was any way that we could leverage federal money that we couldn't otherwise leverage with that money to make it 18 million or 27 million, then I would prefer that.
Well, I mean, some of it one could use, and then we have global commitment or get drawdown federal funds by using some of these funds for that. So that would be a way to leverage it. Some of the things on our list are just straight cash out, but other things do have global commitment impacts, and we could draw down with that.
That's another
Yeah.
thought. Put it on the list. I'll probably forget it.
Okay, that's Dave.
Lynn, I think you said it well. Computers need to be maintained. It's cost doing business. From where I sit, I also believe strongly people need to be maintained. It's not the cost of doing business, it's the cost and purpose of government. I wish somebody in years' time would set aside funds where interest could be earned so that we could invest it. So we didn't have 1,000 kids a year in foster care because they've been abused or neglected. But my real point, when I heard Marty read the list of programs that the funds were for, I didn't hear, though I may have missed it, I didn't hear the Agency of Human Services and an integrated eligibility system.
Nope,
Did you?
it's not on it.
Anybody?
It's not on that list.
Yeah, and yet
Already started for-
I think this is the third year in a row that the agency, and it could be more than that, has had $37 million in a fund that draws the excess federal receipts. And we're told that 21 million, and correct me if I'm wrong, Emily, roughly 21 million has been targeted for some type of IT project, all above the $64 million funds or anything that we've heard
Separate
reported.
fund, separate.
And
fund.
it sounds mysterious to me because I've never seen any transparency around it. But I'm not a great mathematician. I know if there's 37 and somebody's highlighted 21, that leaves something left over. And I just keep wondering if and whether we could have even a little bone from that or some of that.
How do we look into that, Emily?
We have, right, Emily's
Yeah.
done some good work on it, but it hasn't yielded a bone.
Yes, not too much of a, so we've, in, talking with the Agency of Human Services about the account that Representative Yakavoni has referred to, the earned federal receipts account. There is a transfer annually from that account to the general fund. I believe it's 4.6 million annually. Of the money that's in that fund right now, I believe it is about 37 million. 21 million is set aside for the integrated eligibility project, so that is not being paid for out of the technology modernization fund. It's the agency is proposing utilizing the fund that they have. The remaining money in that fund, and I may have to go back and look at it.
Million, it sounds like, is 4.6 is coming to the general fund and then
Yeah.
1, so that's like 26 being used.
I believe some of the additional money in that fund is being set aside for the CWIS.
Yeah.
CWIS that was brought up. I believe that one is having some increased cost pressures over and above what was initially appropriated. There's also in the Budget Adjustment Act, the change that was made related to the DS payment reform. It was decided that no additional money would be appropriated for that purpose. I believe the agency has money in this fund, and depending on how it all sugars off, right? Like, it's a lot of money that moves through that agency over the course of a 12-month period. And depending on how it was, the agency was told to figure that out. It may mean that figuring that out translates to utilizing the balance in that fund to ensure that the DS payment reform works within the existing budget construct of the agency. And then typically, given the size of the agency and the amount of payments go out, a little bit of money is sort of left in that fund just for if and when there's an emergency or something is needed. So it's not all completely accounted for, as I understand. And it's sort of the between your all's conversation with the executive branch, what's the level of how much should remain in that fund for the agency if needed, and the IT projects and the other priorities you all have.
Dave, you have more you want to add to that?
No, but from my sense is that's kept in case there's emergencies. There are a lot of emergencies. On our sheets that we saw up there, a lot of those are emergent. From nurturing, well, I don't need to repeat them. Everybody can see them for themselves. A little bit of relief could go a long ways and prevent even additional expenditures to solve and soften the pain of some of those emergencies. I would suggest we take and appropriate some, a prudent amount
Mhm.
of that to go into whatever amount we ended up with here.
Which is what we're still working on. I don't know if this is the slide, but James, do you want to add something to
I
the?
just wanted to add, James, on the joint fiscal to the discussion of the tech mod fund. So as Rep. Phelps pointed out, ADS has a list of their budget presentations from this year of current appropriations that are active from the tech mod fund to various agencies. There are
I sent you guys the budget.
seven projects, to which appropriations from tech mod fund have been made. And several of those have spent down their appropriations significantly. And some are only about halfway through, for example, spending the appropriation that had been made to them from the tech mod fund. And so it's representative, Ronnie's point about potential uses of tech mod, of the IT modernization fund, tech mod fund for projects in this year. I think the administration and ADS would probably have some color to add about their expectation for needing additional funds for some of these projects out of the tech mod fund going forward. So you might end up in a situation where you take money out of the fund, you had planned on using for projects and that was
Right,
unpaid for us in future years.
Right. okay. Mike?
And if I'm looking at the same chart that you are, the expenditures and remaining amount don't add up to the appropriation. So is that something?
Which appropriation?
To the,
To the left.
said, I guess, 77 million, I think is what was originally appropriated in 3 years into the fund?
No, those are the cost of those specific projects. I think we
Okay.
put 90 million in the fund. We did 50 and 40 or something like that is what I heard somebody say. I gotta think. I do remember a 60 also, but we must have done more than that. We could
There have been 3 transfers in FY 22. There were a total of 60 million transferred. One was 50 million transfer, one was 16 or a change or 7 million, and then an additional $10 million transfer in fiscal year 23. So that adds up to the 77,
Okay.
what they're calling in this slide that you sent around, Madam Chair, the $77 million legislative budget out of the tech mod fund. That's the total of the legislative budget is the total of transfers that have been made to the tech mod fund under legislative budget. And then the subsequent slides show expenditures from those subsequent appropriations that are being announced. So you have the transfers into the fund, the appropriations out of the fund, and the remaining balances of those appropriations.
So the out and the remaining, why wouldn't those equal the appropriation?
Yeah, maybe it's gonna be less. So the
Yeah.
expenditures are 32.7 and the remaining amount is 27 and that adds up to 60,202,000.
Right.
We can look into it.
Huh?
We can look into it.
So, right, where's the other $17 million?
I'm not sure if something came in under budget or funds came from someplace else that were expected to come through this.
Well, at the moment, it looks like unemployment insurance modernization isn't close to spending. That seems to be where the rub is. If I were to pick there was a $30 million was given to that and they've spent 8.9. And it says they have 5.2 left. So it seems to me that maybe that's more money.
Maybe because these are the expenditures, well, says through, it's not right, because I know they've spent, or they intend to spend their whole 30.
So something's weird there.
Something's not right.
The other ones seem to work out
Right.
fine, but the UI one is not working out. The math is working.
Yeah.
And that's where the difference is. So
We can look at
if you can look at it, that would be great.
The UI fund has never worked out.
This is the UI fund. Of course, it's the UI fund.
Why would it change now?
So I do have another slide that adds things and takes that. So the other thing, so there's a possibility of using 9.5 from this fund in interest. That's a choice that we can make. We have 9.14, I'm sorry, 9.39, 9.39 for sure. We possibly could use 9.5. The other thing that we haven't talked about, Emily, and I don't know if it's too early because we don't know yet, is PAYAT.
We can, sure, we get, what I do know at this time, which is, it's only Monday, so we'll know more by Friday.
Yeah, 11:45.
We've been reviewing, the administration as part of Pay Act puts forward the appropriations that they estimate is needed for the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. The JFO has been reviewing the amount that was allocated to for the legislative Pay Act amount, and it appears that it's not going to be sufficient based on the contract that was approved and based on how the things carry forward into for the legislative employees and legislators. So we're looking at what that number should be, and it's probably needs a couple $100,000 more added to it to make sure that there's enough money in the legislative budget for Pay Act in FY27. The other is at the judiciary. They're doing the same exercise to see if what the executive branch calculated is sufficient to cover what the judiciary anticipates their Pay Act need to be. We did have a conversation with with Greg Mosley. I don't know if he's the CFO technically. I think he's the CFO. That is title.
Yes.
Okay. And he indicated that there was in the judiciary bargaining, there was a reclass of a group of judicial employees. So typically with the executive branch, we saw it in the budget adjustment. If there's a request for reclassification that's approved in the budget adjustment, I think it was the game wardens, we saw there was an increase related to the game wardens. And I think there was also in the budget last year was that they thought it was going to be one step, turns out to be two pay grades, excuse me. The judiciary actually bargained it. So they have sort of a one-time increase associated with a reclass of their employees. So that was not part of what was included in what the executive branch put forward for Pay Act needs. So there may be some additional cost pressures associated with.
So it could be $1 to $2 million possibly is what we're talking about, that we therefore have to reduce.
Have to come from somewhere.
We'd have to find that too. It's not in the budget. So let's call it 2. I don't know. We'll know more next. We'll know more, but let's assume for now, for the purpose of that there's 2 million. So if we go with just the 9.39, that's now down to 7.39. If we take some or all of the IT interest, that could be as much as 9.5, or it could be some lesser amount that we use to get up to something else. That's why this is hard.
Place to begin.
Yeah, I wish I had a lovely answer for us all. I mean, these guys have done such good work trying to find money. And, Emily found this, or people found this. It was found as a possibility. And we need to think about what we want to do and what our priorities are. We've done, so that exercise plays into, how we want to spend our money.
And we need to think about next year too,
We need to think about next year.
because we'll gain 13 more or less from
From
the
next year,
next year,
right?
from the Ways and Means changes with the tax. But if we use the income from the tax mod fund, we won't have that next year.
Unless you use it on one time,
Oh, we use it on one time. It would only be on one
on
time.
one time.
But we'll get back to the whole question of, one-time uses or longer-term based things. If we're talking about extra personnel or rate increases for various agencies, those are
base.
Those are base.
And so that's part of the question of like, how much do we have in base? And I think most of the tax we can consider base. So the 9 million there could be considered base. The other would be one time. Is that right? Yes, that would be one time. So sort of half and half at the moment. If we were to use all of both things, it would be half and half. So it definitely limits what the base is. Yeah. Dave?
If I may, just a few minutes, because I don't know where the agenda is. going, and I don't want to encroach.
I don't
on it.
know either, James. We're all just thinking about this.
I just wanted to suggest the possibility of whether the $2 million that the governors recommend as for the stabilization fund is something to consider putting into this conversation. Members will remember last year we appropriated 10 million. This year's budget, the FY 27 budget, governor recommended 2 million. Now, as I sit and reflect on that, the surest way to make sure we would need that 2 million is by not funding our providers properly, because they will break. They will come to the point of being in great need and have to come for the money. Whereas if we strategically invested that into our provider system, maybe we could shore up the DAs and home health and others that are fragile, because it is base funding. It's not.
2 million is not base funding, that's one
No.
time, isn't it?
Well, I'd like to find out whether it is or isn't. I would just spend it differently then. So I appreciate that some might say, don't go there. We need a cushion.
Mhm.
But I want to put it on the table because I think you'll surely need a cushion if we don't provide some help in some areas.
Thank you.
Yep.
It's one time? 2 million is one time.
Can I throw one more thing out there?
Please.
Just for, I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention, and we can potentially talk about it more tomorrow when Pat is here, but a lot of the changes in the Ways and Means bill are related to corporate income tax and how we link up to the, related to business and corporate stuff, which is one of the most volatile sources of revenue. That's not to say that I have any crystal ball or any idea of where corporate tax is going or has been or what will happen, but just to the extent that it's base revenue, assuming all else equal, and we sort of keep going on and the forecast holds, that's fine, but that is just a thing to be aware of when thinking about how to utilize it for what it's worth.
All of our tax revenue is variable and subject to
Yes.
fluctuations.
Right, corporate tends to be more volatile
Travel.
than personal income.
Yeah.
We have evidence of that.
And rooms and meals, sales taxes are
Mhm.
pretty darn stable.
Yeah, firms and meals and sales tax have been fairly stable. The rate of growth may be slowing, but it doesn't change us. So we have a lot to think about.
On that happy note.
I would check in with James before you go today. To make sure that he understands all of your stuff and doesn't have any questions. So that's a task you need to do. I'm switching topics now to bills.
Want me to get?
Thank you, Emily. You're welcome to stay there. It's really nice to look at you instead of the screen, so whatever you want to do. Thank you for putting this all together. Appreciate it. You guys just, whatever we do without you. We have, we were sent 12 bills on Friday. We have about 12 bills or so that we still have on the wall. So we're going to be going through around 25 bills this. We're not going to, as I said to you in my email over the weekend, we are not going to relitigate all the work that the policy committees did. We're going to do 30 minutes a bill, except for a couple of big ones. The Human Services Homelessness Housing Initiative, which is taking what the governor did and doing it. We're going to spend time on that because we need to know what that is. No new money. It's all the same money and it's the same amount of money, but we need to understand the program. Everything else, almost everything else, I'm pretty much allowing 30 minutes. So we're going to do high level, understand it, go to the money. Great. We have a lot of possible votes on there. We'll get a sense of whether the committee's ready to vote or wants to vote later. We have a whole bunch of bills that we've heard that we haven't voted on yet. So we'll probably take 45 minutes or an hour later in the week and just vote those bills out one way or another. We'll probably be taking money out. If there's some of these bills, we've said we want to fund certain things in some of these bills. And if we decide to do that, we can leave the money in the bill, but account for it in the budget. So we can make that, we don't put the bill in the budget, we can account for the money in the budget, because it's the same pot of money that we're using in its general fund. So we will be voting on a lot of those bills by the end of the week. But tomorrow, we're gonna hear a lot of bills for the first time. So just remember, we're not digging in deep to every little detail and every word in the bill.
But suggest something that whoever's coming in to present,
Yeah,
let's let them present everything they want to present before we start
asking questions.
It just adds to, we know that it's kind of.
Yeah, write down your questions.
Puts them in a spot, puts them in a spot here too.
Yeah.
If they're not, they're halfway through and you got 9 minutes or.
Right, and then you get
90
derailed. We joked one year that we never got past page 3 of the presentation, so we don't really want to do that.
Yeah, you should
We do want to let them go through it, yeah. And then we'll ask questions at the end. And that will help all of us go faster.
And it would really be expedited if they just focused on the need for the appropriation.
Right, although if we're going to think about what the appropriations for, we kind of want to know what it's for. We don't need to know all the details and how the policy.
It's in the purpose line on the bill.
Yeah, no, it's a high level, 30,000 feet, understand it, take us to the money.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah. So we all have a role to play in getting ourselves through all this, right? And we'll try to minimize later nights, but I don't know. As I said to you, we may have some late nights. This night might not be one of them, but other things.
So
Go ahead, Marty.
when you say we'll take the money out of the bill, then as an example, we say, okay, well, our amendment is to eliminate these last 3 sections of your bill and it will go to the floor.
Yes, yes. And what it may say is the last 3 sections are contingent, or the bill is contingent upon available funds. It depends on how the bill is written. So there may be a couple of different ways that we do it. So the whole bill may be contingent upon available funds, or there might be a section. So last week we had a bill and we took out the positions, but we passed the bill, and that was easy to do because it was kind of a separate thing. Some of these other bills may have an appropriation for one area, but the policy is important to go. That's what we did with S60, the farm and forest bill. We didn't appropriate any money because if at the end of the session, there's money that committee of conference can decide to appropriate money to that. So there's several different ways to do it. I'd like to get, as much as possible, I'd like to get bills out of here and get them over to the Senate so we get them on the way.
But we may be establishing a program, but no money.
Right, but we won't establish, the program might be contingent upon establishing the money.
Right, but it will go to the floor and people will understand that that's
Yes.
contingent upon.
We did a lot of that the last couple of years, yeah.
We just have a 60, which was the fund.
Well, that's
which was the farming.
Right, right. So, but then it's all ready to go. If we find money, we can fund it with, then the program's ready to go. We don't have to go through a whole legislation thing again. So it's frustrating in one hand and then sort of efficient a little bit on the other hand. We don't know what the Senate's going to do with this. So that is talking about bills. And, yeah, so you have the agenda, you have the list. We'll keep updating that. No, we may get more bills tomorrow. I don't think so. Are we gonna get any more bills? I think we've got all the bills we're gonna get.
We're gonna get 5 votes from Jason.
Oh, that's right. Ways and Means has bills. We're not done yet. I knew we weren't done yet. 5 more bills are coming.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry.
So, yeah, fun never ends. All right, so we're starting tomorrow at 8:30. James is presenting miscellaneous public utility subjects. There actually isn't any money. It had money at one point. You might recall we get bills that don't have any money, but if the underlying original bill had money, it still comes to us. So that should be an easy one. And then Rep. Lalonde is going to come in and talk about the Ethics Commission. He has some language he'd like us to add in, and he may have some other things, but there's budget language he wants to talk to us about with regard to the Ethics Commission. And then we have another thing from Judiciary related to recidivism, emergency management bill. That's coming from GovOps and has a lot of different appropriations. That may be more than 30 minutes, but we'll see. We'll let them talk and then we'll see it's there. We have another one with no money in it again around healthcare, financial transactions. Again, underlying bill had some money. This one doesn't.
We're going to hear miscellaneous tax. We've already gotten an idea of what miscellaneous tax is going to be like. It's good to hear it more than once. And then 3 other bills in the afternoon, ending with Teresa's bill on the housing and homelessness initiative. So that will be, we finished today. So more to come.
It's that.
Just that. That's Tuesday. All right, any other thoughts or things anybody wants to say before we go outside? Wait,
Just thought, we always say it's all about the money, but we have made some significant improvement to some of the bills that come through here in terms of policy wise, what we've said. And we all have to vote on these bills. So, it's not like we're separated from the policy.
we aren't, and we can vote on the floor for the whole bill as well, so. You get 2 chances in some cases. All right, so 8:30 sharp tomorrow morning. And